an international nonpartisan group of parents and advocates safeguarding against gender ideology. Before we get started, I want to say how disappointed and disgusted I am with my party, the Democrats, not just here in our state government, but nationally. When the Democrats in the House had a chance to restore dignity and safety to females, they didn't, instead arguing that women and girls are safer with men in their private spaces. Every Democrat in the House voted to keep the door open for men to steal women's trophies and watch them undress, save for Representatives Pelosi, Swalwell, Whitesides, and Sherman, who were so feckless that they abstained from the vote. California Democrats have an opportunity to redeem themselves by voting for Assemblymember Bill Assaley's bill if they can see past party affiliation and vote based on reality and in keeping with the will of the people. Assemblymember Bill Assaley has become the champion for parental rights in California, and today becomes the champion for all girls and women in California. Please welcome Bill Assaley.
Thank you, Erin. Good morning, everybody. It is a new day in California.
Yes.
This press conference is about restoring common sense to our state, preserving parental rights, and protecting our youth from radical gender ideology.
Yes.
President Trump's actions to save girls' sports on the federal level have been critical to our fight here in California, but this is just the beginning. We know the state of California is going to do everything it can to resist and avoid compliance with federal law, so it's our role to try to force change here at the state and local level. That is why today I am announcing my bill to save girls' sports by restoring biological, sex-based distinctions in school athletics and facilities. Here's what we're going to do. About a decade ago, they passed Education Code 221.5F, which allowed students to pick facilities and sports teams based on their gender identity as opposed to their sex. So that means any boy who believes he's a girl can enter the girls' bathroom, locker room, or sports team. That is wrong, and that is in violation of Title IX protections afforded to women in sports and in those facilities. So my bill will reverse Education Code 221.5F. We're going to right that wrong. In my district, Martin Luther King High School and the Riverside Unified School District have been sued by the co-captain of the varsity track team. She was bumped off her team and replaced by a biological male. Riverside Unified School District defended its actions by citing to Education Code Section 221.5. And they simply do not care that they are also violating Title IX. So they're going to have to deal with that in court. What was really surprising, though, was sort of the attitude of the faculty and the administration there to attack these girls for speaking up. Girls have a First Amendment right, as do every single person. And when they expressed that they didn't agree with these policies, they were persecuted and they were compared to Nazis. That is unacceptable. And that is why we have previously called for the resignation of the superintendent of that school district, and she needs to go. That culture is rotten to the core when teachers feel it's okay to call little girls Nazis. That's unacceptable. We stand here united. This is a very diverse coalition. You have Republicans, you have Democrats, you have independents, you have people on all different spectrums of politics here, but we are standing united today behind protecting women's and girls' rights. We know that women have not always had the same opportunity as men to compete in sports and to pursue other endeavors, and that is why we have passed laws like Title IX to protect them and to give them their safe space and those opportunities to succeed and to be champions in their own right. And no boy has a right to take that away from a girl. So we will do what we can here, and we are very grateful for a new administration at the federal level, and we look forward to working with the federal government to protect girls in sports and in schools here in California. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bill. It is a great honor to introduce Coach Melissa Beatty-Smoos. I believe that Melissa is the first collegiate coach in the entire nation to risk and lose her job because she placed women and girls above the desire of males to participate in women's sports. Melissa is a hero and hopefully will inspire other coaches, be they male or female, to do the right thing and return sports to be based upon immutable sex. Please welcome Melissa.
Well, good morning. All right. Hi, I'm Melissa Beatty-Smoos. I first want to thank Bill Iseli for authorizing this bill and returning sex-segregated activities and spaces to be based on immutable sex. I recently was terminated from San Jose State University, not because I was a bad coach, but because I filed a Title IX complaint and claim to protect the women, sanity, integrity, and female sports. I have coached for over 2 decades now at the collegiate level, and I can't even imagine in a million years that I would be here and that I would have been sharing and space with a male in women's sports, that our team would have to endure the type of abuse that was happening to them. With our, unbeknownst to me, when I moved my family across the country, I was not informed that there was a male on the team, which was known by the university and the athletic department and the head volleyball coach. So, with accepting the job, I just assumed I would be coaching all females. Before I learned of Blair Fleming being a male, I was observing the first practice and noticed that there was a lot of differences. That, wow, this person is jumping higher than any of our athletes without even approach, hitting the ball much harder. And I've been doing this for many years. I was like, something's a little off here. So, and then come to find out a couple weeks later, I was told that Blair Fleming is a male and that I need to stay silent in this and that I cannot share this with anyone. And moving forward, that we got to make sure we protect the male. And so when finally the female athletes discovered that there was actually a male on the team, they were told as well that they need to seek therapy and, and that they have to keep silent. They were told that this is not their story to tell and that they are to protect Blair and the scrutiny that's happening around Blair, and that, they were just being basically told that their feelings, their thoughts did not matter. So with that, last week I do feel like it was a huge step forward with President Trump's executive order, but still we have issues like the NCAA updated policy is still very inadequate, and it's just really kind of disturbing. So with the NCAA, they are not standing up and making sure that we need to make sure that there's DNA testing, and that moving forward, it's only women playing in women's sports. For right now, it's still saying that men can get, a quote, all benefits. So they're still able to receive the scholarships, be in the women's locker room, be in the women's spaces, the safety and unfairness on the volleyball court. So we definitely need to continue this fight and continue to make sure that laws and legislation is changed so that we can have safe spaces for women and women in sports. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Melissa. In 2022, California Senator Scott Wiener, in response to Texas Governor Greg Abbott's letter to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, stated, and I quote, well, first, let me say what the governor did. What the governor did is he wrote a letter saying that it is child abuse for parents to submit their children to gender affirmative interventions, using their euphemism. What Scott Wiener said in 2022 is, "This is terrifying. As part of the GOP effort to eliminate trans children and LGBTQ people generally, the governor of Texas directed Child Protective Services to investigate parents of trans kids for prosecution. He also directs teachers, nurses, and doctors to report these parents." Scott Wiener further tweeted that Texas is proposing to remove trans children from their parents and place them into foster care. Well, that's very ironic, because the opposite is happening here in California, isn't it? Parents are being investigated by CPS. Teachers and doctors are calling CPS on parents who refuse to socially or medically transition their children. Children are being ripped from their families if those families want those children to grow up comfortable and accepting their natural, unaltered bodies. These children are being placed in foster care and into the hands of chosen families that are more than happy to permit the children to be poisoned with puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and have their undiseased body parts removed. For 3 years, I have been searching for a bold sponsor of a bill to recognize that family is the most important unit.
Yes. Yes.
And then Assembly Member Leticia Castillo was elected. I cannot express my gratitude enough towards her, so please welcome Member Castillo.
Good morning, and thank you for being here today. I am Assemblywoman Leticia Castillo, and I'm proud to be the first Republican to represent the 58th Assembly District since we lost it in 2016. I ran on a promise to protect parental rights and safeguard our children, and today I am here to share 2 important pieces of legislation and to keep that promise. I'm announcing 2 bills I authored that reaffirm parents' rightful and constitutional role in deciding what is best for their children. California must return to being a state where parents feel safe to raise their families and instill their values without fear of government interference.
Yes. Right.
After all, parents are the primary educators of their children, and children belong to their parents, not the state.
Yes.
The first bill, AB 600, is the PROTECT Act, which stands for Parents' Rights on the Education of Children about Transgenderism. Our state recognizes that parental involvement education is vital for our republic, and parents have the ultimate responsibility for imparting their values to their children. Our laws support this by allowing parents to excuse their children from health education that conflicts with their personal beliefs. Today, the concept of transgenderism has infiltrated not just health classes, but nearly every subject in schools. Parents in my district and across California are demanding the right to shield their children from teachings that promote the idea that biological sex is meaningless and that they may have been born in the wrong body. As a mental health provider, I have witnessed the alarming trend of vulnerable kids, those struggling with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and other challenges as they adopt transgender identities. As they struggle with the changes their bodies go through during puberty, they are being led to believe that their natural feelings of discomfort can be explained away by a transgender identity, which is not true. The statistics are staggering. In just 5 years leading to 2021, the number of children ages 6 to 17 identifying as transgender has increased threefold. More recently, the Manhattan Institute reported a shocking 100-fold increase in gender dysphoria diagnoses in the United States. These diagnoses often lead to medical treatments that include puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and body-altering surgeries that are irreversible and require the child to be under medical care for the rest of their lives. In California, nearly 2% of young people ages 13 to 17 identify as transgender, a troubling statistic that raises serious concerns about the curriculum being taught in our schools today. Parents of all backgrounds, regardless of race, religion, or political affiliation, want the choice to determine whether their children are exposed to discussions about transgenderism and medical interventions that will permanently impact their lives. The PROTECT Act will allow parents to decide if their children participate in any lessons related to transgender topics, including the notion that biological sex is non-binary. It will allow parents to opt their children out of any instruction related to transgender topics without penalty, while also granting parents the right to sue if schools violate the law. Reestablishing the primacy of parental rights over dangerous indoctrination is a critical first step in reestablishing trust in our schools and educators. Parents must be able to intervene when the best interest of their children is at stake. My second bill, AB 579, is named after Yaeli, the daughter of Abigail Martinez, a loving mother who immigrated to the United States from El Salvador to provide a better life for her family. Tragically, Abigail's daughter was taken from her in the name of gender ideology. Thank you, Abigail, for being here today to share your heartbreaking story. Child and Family Services and family courts have been weaponized to separate gender-confused children from loving families who refuse to socially or medically transition their children. Schools are being trained to assess and grade parents based on whether or not they are supportive of their child's transgender identity. The ACLU, the Human Rights Campaign, the National Education Association, and the National Center for Lesbian Rights have developed a manual that instructs educators to support parents who affirm a child's transgender identity over parents who do not. AB 579, known as Yaeli's Law, aims to end this practice. It will ensure that no parent can be accused of child abuse or neglect for refusing to treat their child as the opposite sex or for refusing to consent to harming their child with puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgical removal of their sexual organs. Parents who are falsely accused will also have the right to sue those who make the false claims. The right to sue is a critical element of this bill, as children who adopt transgender identities are currently overrepresented in foster care and homeless shelters, because these agencies are aware that claims of abuse are a loophole used to circumvent parental consent for receiving gender-affirming medical treatment. The bill will also prevent family court judges from considering it in a child's best interest for a parent to agree with the child's belief that they are being born in the wrong body, and that the child must undergo medical treatments that will result in their sterilization, loss of functioning body parts, and increased health risk in almost every category, from heart, brain, cancer, and life expectancy.
Yes.
No parent should have to choose between keeping their child and socially or medically transitioning their child. In California, Democrats refuse to hear this bill. They are sending a clear message to every parent of a child whose identity does not align with their biological sex, must affirm an ever-expanding list of gender identities and consent to permanent and irreversible medical treatments. This should alarm every single parent and make them reconsider raising children in our state. These bills are about restoring parental rights and placing safeguards around our families. We must protect our children from harmful ideologies that are completely out of control and have already done unspeakable harm. It's time for this abuse of our children to end. And the constituents, not just from my district, but from all districts, agree. Thank you.
In 2020, when I began researching about the transgender movement, I stumbled upon Abigail Martinez's story. I cried uncontrollably because everything in her story mirrored mine, except I thwarted CPS, likely because of my lawyer credentials. Abby's story would have had a very different outcome if California did not punish parents for not believing in the fiction of a transgender child. No child is transgender. No child has been born in the wrong body. No human can change sex. And no child should ever be taken from a family who believes in biological sex.
That's right.
Please welcome, truly one of my heroes, Abigail Martinez.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abigail Martinez. I want to thank Assemblywoman Castillo. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I'm so honored that you have named a bill after my sweet daughter, Jaylee. Gracias, Asambleísta Castillo, de todo corazón. On September 4, 2019, my beautiful daughter, Jaylee, at the age of 19, knelt in front of an incoming train, leaving her brother, sisters, and me forever. This terrible tragedy could have been prevented if it should never have happened. That the Department of Children and Family Service, the California Dependency Court, Arcadia High School, and the LGBTQ group Rise nonprofit are responsible for her senseless death. They can go on without another thought about Yaley. But I will always feel the emptiness in my heart. This group of people might as well have pushed her themselves. They put gender ideology above everything else when they took her away from my loving family. Jaylee began to feel very sad during her teenage year, which is normal. Sometimes they go through a lot. They put gender. Jaylee began to feel very sad during her teenage year. Her friends, who all thought they were transgender, and even one of their parents made her believe her sadness was because she was really a boy. The school counselor, instead of helping with her depression, convinced her that she was born in the wrong body. This only made her feel worse about herself. Jaylee needed someone to tell her that she was already perfect and beautiful, as we all did. This social worker told me to have a funeral for my daughter and a birthday party for my new son. I didn't know then that I will be holding a real funeral for her just 3 years later. Jaylee was taught how to make a false claim of abuse against me by her friend's mother to get around my refusal to consent to her taking testosterone. First, she said I physical abused her, but I was found not guilty. Then she claimed I was emotional abuse, which they couldn't prove. Because I will not call her by different male name or use or different pronouns or male pronouns. Let me say it again. I was investigated by CPS because I want to call my daughter the name her father and I gave her with love. I was investigated because I will not treat my daughter as if she were a boy. I begged the judge and CPS to return her to me. I asked them to give her the mental help she needed, instead of just agree with her new identity. I even agreed to let her dress as a boy. And just to keep her with me. But no one cares. They had their own plans. It was in their own agenda. My daughter just was a number to them. I had no chance. RISE, the LGBTQ nonprofit with almost 200 million in assessed possible, founded by our tax dollars, want my daughter. RISE stands for Recognize, Intervene, Support, and Empower. To me, intervene means breaking up families. On their website, they say they target kids from 5 to 17 years old, supporting chosen families by moving children away from parents who don't believe their child was born in the wrong body. CPS eventually decided I wasn't abusive, but it didn't matter anymore. It took them 3 years. And during those years, I could only see Jaylee for 1 hour per week under supervision with their warning that if I talk about, it was a warning, if I talk about the identity or the gender, I will never see her again. In those 3 years, Yaylee slept on floors, moved from place to place, and struggled to have enough to eat. She lived in poverty. During those years, the judge allowed her to start testosterone against my wishes because I was the only one who disagreed with it. Jaylee was treated at Children's Hospital Los Angeles Gender Clinic, which is now being sued by another girl for falsely promising that transition treatment will solve her mental health problems. Toward the end, Jaylee admitted that she was not going to go for the treatment or the surgeries anymore because she realized that she will never be like her brother. She decided not to follow the LGBTQ that promised her the state was going to pay for all the surgeries that she needs. But she never told them that there was a pain and a price to pay to go for all these lies. So I was clear. Oh, and Jaylee was suffering when she realized that she was not gonna go through the treatment. She realized that she was suffering from pain. All her body hurt. She couldn't concentrate. She couldn't sleep. And her depression got deeper. I was clear for emotional abuse after 3 years, but it was too late. The damage was already done. My daughter was gone by then. No parent be investigated by CPS just because they want their child to grow up comfortable in their sex and happy with their own body. No queremos que esto ocurra a todos los padres y madres que le quiten el derecho a los padres de educarlos y de apoyarlos con la necesidad que ellos tienen y que no los llenen de mentiras, haciéndoles creer que la transición es lo que va a cubrir el género. Todo eso es mentira. Gracias, señora Castillo. Gracias.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it must be so painful to repeat it. And your bravery is beyond words. We all have heard by now the tired and deceitful trope, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? But here in California, there is a second Sophie's choice. Agree to turn your child into a lifelong medical patient or lose custody. Next, we will hear from Adam Vina, who lives the nightmare caused by a judicial system that is trained by the trans mafia to favor the parent who foists a gender identity even on a baby, instead of the parent who accepts the authentic child. This is what the Democrats and parents in power do to rational parents. They are bent on destroying children's futures. Adam, will you please come up?
Good morning, everybody. Like Aaron Friday said, my name is Adam Vina. I'm a part of Mom and Dad Army and also Our Duty. I want to express my deepest gratitude for both of the assembly members for advocating for parents like me. I sometimes feel hopeless, but knowing that you are trying to pass laws that protect against tearing parents apart from their children over transgenderism helps me get through the day. I was overjoyed when my live-in girlfriend gave birth to my son, Aiden. I loved playing with him at our local playgrounds. He was everything to me. Unfortunately, my relationship with his mom did not turn out that well, and we ended up separating. It was not a good breakup, but we agreed to share custody of Aiden 50-50. But then I learned that she was dressing him up in girls' clothes. This was not prompted by Aiden, but was his mother's sole decision. I asked her to stop doing that, fearful that it would be more confusing by cross-dressing my son. Aiden was a rough and tumble little boy. Plus, no child is transgender. Boys who like typical girls things are still male and with no need for any changes. Girls who like activities usually preferred by boys, but are still females. When he was 3 years old, Aiden told me that after a day of celebrating his birthday with me, his mom bought him a pink dress. And I got down on one knee and looked him in the eyes and I said, "Hey buddy, you're a boy and boys don't wear dresses." He looked at me back and said, "Okay, Daddy." And I couldn't understand why my ex wanted to treat him like a girl, why she wanted to confuse my son. So in a fear of panic, I did not know how to handle the situation with my ex, so I sent her 47 consecutive text messages pleading with her to stop dressing Aiden in girls' clothes. That boys should not be given pink dresses as birthday presents. Plain dress up is one thing, but encouraging a boy to behave like a stereotypical girl was another recruiting for him to appear to the world as though he was a girl. It was another thing altogether. Aiden did not have a choice with what his mother dressed him in. A 3-year-old does not have the capacity to understand or advocate for himself. Those 47 text messages begging her to treat Aiden as a male child that he is and will always be, were enough for the court system to issue a temporary restraining order against me. Despite the fact that there was nothing in the messages were threatening violence towards my ex or Aiden, the judge barred me from seeing my son. Sorry guys.
You got it, Adam.
I don't even know where I'm at now. The judge must have been trained by the gender ideologues that teach family courts that parents who believe in biological reality are abusers. The temporary restraining order lasted 3 years, and another judge granted a 5-year restraining order on me. My ex has continued to treat my son as a girl, and I'm sick at the thought that she may put him on puberty blockers, which have severe, irreversible effects. How is it that a parent who wants his son to grow up comfortable in his unaltered body is the one who has no rights to be in that child's life. It's just backwards. It makes no sense at all. I am not sure if or when I finally get to be a part of Aiden's life again. That I will not be able to undo the damage that has been done to him. But I will never stop fighting for him. I will never stop fighting for other families and parents who are also losing custody and contact with their children for refusing to socially or medically transition their child. I really can't believe that those parents who are willing to poison their children, sterilize them, and confuse them are the good parents. And the parents who want their children to develop naturally are deemed the abusers. Hey Aiden, if you get to watch this, I want you to know that I love you. And I'll always be there for you, buddy. Waiting for you and ready to help you, buddy. Thank you.
This is real life. This is what is happening in not just the blue states, but every state in our country. Parents like Adam are losing custody of their kids because of gender ideology. It needs to end, and it needs to end today.
Is this done on purpose?
Someday, there will be a statue in honor of our next speaker, Jamie Reed. Woo! Woo! Sorry, Jamie, it's true. Jamie is an unexpected hero. Her revelations about pediatric gender clinics needs to be read by every lawmaker before they consider these bills. Jamie calls California the Death Star, and she isn't wrong. Every bill that propagates the idea of transgender children and people has its genesis here in California. So please give a welcome to Jamie Reed.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Reed, and I hold a Master's of Science in Clinical Research Management from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. I am a lifelong Democrat. I am a mom of 5 boys, 3 of which I adopted out of our foster care system, and I'm a lesbian. I am also the public whistleblower from the Pediatric Gender Center in St. Louis, Missouri. I saw patients from the age of 3 until the age of 26, and I worked with nearly 1,500 unique patients. I worked in pediatric gender medicine for nearly 5 years, and I was once a true believer. I once trained the judges, Adam, that worked in your case. I once trained those caseworkers that would come to your home and take your children away. What I learned is that these interventions are based on poor research with poor evidence and poor outcomes. In the center where I worked, I directly saw patients who were being harmed by these so-called medical interventions. I saw patients whose mental health got worse after being started on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. I had a patient who had their breasts surgically removed and called us within 3 months begging for us to put her breasts back on. The last I heard is that she is now a detransitioner, pregnant, and was unable to ever consider breastfeeding her children. I sent minor patients into emergency surgery after the devastation of testosterone had degraded their vaginal tissue so much that they experienced vaginal lacerations requiring surgical repair after their first sexual experiences. I blew the whistle on these interventions in Missouri, filed an affidavit with our Attorney General, and within 3 months, these interventions were stopped in my state. This all started in the Netherlands when a small group of clinicians came up with this terrible idea to transition kids. They were seeking the children that they would believe would go on to have this lifetime of trouble with their sex and intervene with them when they were young. Why did they do this? Because all of the transsexual adults that they were working with were not doing well. When they completed the first study, 68 out of 70 of those children were same-sex attracted, and one of those children died as a result of this initial intervention. This was a medical experiment that should never have been reproduced anywhere else in the world. They transitioned these kids not because they had any certainty that they would go on to have lifetime troubles, but because our society has a long discomfort with the way gays and lesbians live our bodies and our sex lives. We were expendable. We were okay to be experimented on. We were okay to have our endocrine systems destroyed with wrong sex hormones. We were okay to have our fertility taken away, and we were okay to have our sexual function ripped away. When we caught wind of this idea here in America, we cast this huge net across this country in every state, and we pulled in whatever kid we could catch. I travel here to California to tell you that your state is the worst in the nation. What you do has consequences across our entire nation. We in Missouri have fought back against your extremism, but we need your leadership. We need you to stop. Stop this homophobic disaster. Stop weaponizing our child protective services to destroy good families, and stop pretending like this is medical care. We need you to be the beacon, to lead the way, to bring health care back to our children and sanity back to our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Our next speaker is attorney Bernadette Broyles. She is a trailblazer in the legal community, fighting to preserve the sanctity of families, the innocence of children, and the dignity of women. She is fearless in her pursuit of justice and one of the few attorneys willing to represent families in California fighting to retain custody of their gender-confused children. Bernadette?
Bernadette is the best lawyer. The best.
Oh, you're just biased. Good morning. My name is Bernadette Ramirez Broyles. I am the president and general counsel of the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. Our mission is singular. It is to protect children, females, and parental rights against the institutionalized gender identity ideology that is violating their fundamental rights. My firm has brought lawsuits against school districts around the country that have secretly transitioned children, and I am presently representing a family here in California. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. Each of these laws, I'm here to support the Protect Kids from Gender Indoctrination, Yaley's Law, and Save Girls Sports. Why? Because I'm here to give witness by the injustices and the devastations that my families have experienced, that these laws are absolutely needed to protect children and females, girls, and parents in this state. And you are. California is a leader state, and so therefore, by extension, the rest of the country. All three of these bills protect the vulnerable. Let us be clear what is really at stake here. Children whose bodies and minds are still forming. Parents when state officials overstep their rightful boundaries. girls and women when forced to compete against and in front of males. Inconceivable. All three bills recognize that sex is real, important, and harm follows when you fail to recognize it as a reality.
Yes.
Protect kids from gender indoctrination in schools, empowers parents to opt their children out. We've heard about it already. These are trusted adults that are encouraging children to believe with the imagination and the intensity that kids have that it's a medical impossibility. It is medically impossible to change your sex, but they're encouraged to believe that which is impossible. Therefore, putting them on a course of unremitting conflict against their own bodies.
Yes.
That is a war they cannot win.
Yes.
It's leading children, especially girls, to deny their sex and to hate their sex bodies. And it's sowing confusion and social contagion amongst children whose mental health and youthful experience leaves them vulnerable to rejecting their sex. Here are some real life consequences. The daughter of Wendell and Maria Perez, Wendell and Maria Perez, actually, I should say, first learned that their daughter was receiving the harms of gender ideology in school when they were summoned to the principal's office to learn their daughter, who had never had any mental health problems before, had attempted suicide twice at school. They arrived only in time to see her in the back of a police car being whisked away without even their consent. Thankfully today, she's out of the cult and she is now prepared to speak out, but it was a long road to get there. Sage Blair, and I use her name specifically because I have permission, had experienced trauma in her early life. And so when she hit puberty, she began to receive, again, gender indoctrination at school. They allowed her to use the boys' bathroom. She's a diminutive, tiny little girl. And in the boys' bathroom, she was sexually assaulted. She runs away from home thinking she would protect her parents from the boys who were threatening her, and right into the arms of a waiting adult predator who are waiting for our girls. They're waiting for them. Who raped her. This girl had never had a kiss prior to this, and then sex trafficked her to other males. When she was found, if that's not bad enough, when she was found by the Baltimore police, she was not returned to her parents. She was placed in the system because they had deemed that their parents were not sufficiently supportive of her because they refused to use her preferred name and male pronouns. And so the system placed her into a facility for troubled boys who knew what sex she was and sexually assaulted her. She runs away because she's unsafe, and she's sex trafficked again into Texas. These are the consequences of what happens to our kids. I want to talk about Yaley's Law real quick. That's why we need to protect kids against gender indoctrination, but Yaley's Law. I won't go into it because you already know what it does. It should not be necessary, quite frankly. But right now, the California Department of Children and Family Services is removing custody of gender-confused children from parents who believe it is best to raise their child as their biological sex. How do I know this? Because I am currently representing a family here in California whose child was removed because the parents were not deemed supportive of their child's sex denial. These are fit and loving parents. These are parents who came here from another country for a better life. And in their country, they believe mankind is made male and female. Go figure. They were reported by the very mental health professional that they had turned to for help. I have witnessed the living agony of these parents, like having surgery without anesthesia, as they go month after month, week after week, deprived of their child that they had done everything for. These bills protect the fundamental right of parents to direct the upbringing, the care, and the education of their children that's found in the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Don't tell me that California, the law of California is subordinated to the United States Constitution. The decisions of the Supreme Court of the United States go back 100 years, recognizing that children are not the mere creatures of the state. They recognize that parents must be the supreme authority and protection of their children because no one loves a child like their parents or understands a child like their parents. And when that authority and protection is diminished, let me tell you something, bad things happen to children. The last thing I want to mention that about Safe Girl Sports, we know what that will do. I currently, right now, represent a little girl that was sexually assaulted in the bathroom because a gender fluid boy was allowed to follow her in there and be there. Her life will never be the same. And I now have the privilege of representing yet another courageous woman. The former coach of San Jose State University's women's volleyball team, Melissa Beatty Smooth. We've already heard from her today. Melissa had moved her, yes, she deserves it. Absolutely. Melissa had moved her entire family across the country to accept this honor. And when Melissa was informed that a male appropriating a female identity would be allowed on the team using the same facilities as the female athletes, she was forced to conceal this from her athletes and from their parents. Melissa was the only woman on staff. So there was a trust there. And you can imagine how hard this was. Melissa was suspended and her contract inexplicably not renewed after filing a Title IX complaint on behalf of her female athletes who had shared with her their concerns that they would be injured by this male athlete on the team. Melissa observed these injuries. It wasn't hearsay. That they would be forced to undress in front of a male against their will. That is a sexual assault in my book. That they'd be forced to room alone with a male. We're exploring Melissa's legal options, and they are quite a few. But what the story of Melissa's female athletes tells us is that there are places and there are activities where bodily sex matters, like privacy facilities and competitive sports, and what such facilities and competitive opportunities are not afforded separately to each sex, women and girls are harmed. Pure and simple. So, protect kids from gender indoctrination. Yaley's Law, Save Girl Sports deserve to be heard and debated in this assembly and to be passed. Thank you.
You're hired. Over the last 4 years, I have spent countless hours in committee hearings, listening to the same discussions. Lived experiences is often a repeated phrase, as is the LGBTQ's caucus chorus stating that those of us who are trying to protect gender confused children, they say to us that we deny trans kids' very existence, that they are marginalized. They shout at us, they sneer at us. But really, there's no group's existence that is more denied or more marginalized than the detransitioners. Their voices are ignored, but no one can possibly ignore our next guest voice, Chloe Cole, who will not stop speaking the truth everywhere and anywhere, to anyone, to a group of 500, to a group of 10. So please welcome the unflappable, amazing Chloe Cole.
Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing today? I'm glad that I was able to make it here because just yesterday I was in Los Angeles. I'm kind of all over the place because of my advocacy work. I believe in the protection of children from certain harm, by mutilation, by sterilization, under the guise of gender-affirming care. I believe in the protection of parents' rights and the rights of families. The rights of parents to tell their children no when they want to undertake harmful decisions, and the right to be fully informed about their child's transgender status, mental health issues, and about the true harms of what they call gender-affirming care. I myself am a detransitioned woman from the San Joaquin Valley, not too far from here. And I began to feel, a few years into puberty, that my body was wrong, that my regular pubertal distress was because something was different about me. Like I had some condition. Like I had to fix myself. From a very young age, I felt as though I was isolated, and I found it very difficult to fit in with the other children around me. I thought differently from them. I couldn't understand them, especially the other girls around me. My female role models and the girls around me at school, I just couldn't relate to them. I was on the more tomboyish side. I was very creative. I tended to think outside the box in many ways. And I was searching for some purpose, some sense of identity throughout much of my childhood and my adolescent years. And when I discovered other children online who were quite like me, who considered themselves to be as part of the transgender community, it felt like I had finally found the answer for me. Like I could explain myself. I could finally pinpoint what about me that made me different. And what I thought it was that I had the brain of a young man in the body of a girl. And that I had this condition called gender dysphoria. I was transgender, and the only treatment for me was to go through the process of socially and medically transitioning. So I began at the age of 12 to call myself a young man by the name of Leo. And I told my mother and father about these feelings. They didn't really know exactly how to respond to any of this. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, but they never really had to deal with this with any of my older siblings. They could sense that I was going through a normal search for my identity and myself as a preteen. That perhaps as a tomboy, I was going through a phase of sorts. But they couldn't quite pinpoint where exactly these feelings stemmed from for me. And thought that perhaps they weren't fully equipped to really deal with this, because maybe it was a deeper psychological problem. And that they were not wrong about. They decided that they would do some research online, all of which pointed them in the direction of either affirmation or immediate medical attention. So, they started having me see a therapist in hopes that the deeper problem would be discovered, that I would be questioned, that I would be helped and taught how to cope with these feelings, while still just allowing me to be a child, to explore myself within boundaries, and to just grow up, to go through puberty, to be given the chance to maybe come back out of this, and if not, perhaps decide to go into this as a fully grown adult. But we weren't given that option. My family wasn't given that option. Mom and Dad were told that this was the only choice available for us. they asked, why? Why does she want this so badly? Why does she want to undertake medical procedures when she's still only a child? Why is this a necessity for her? And they were told that it would be life or death for me by these doctors. The therapist started talking about the high rates of suicidal ideation within the transgender community. And it's a common tactic for these clinicians and counselors to then tell parents that it's because of a lack of acceptance in their transgender identity, because of bullying or harassment, because they're not allowed medical intervention to change themselves on the outside. And they didn't just say this once. They repeated this lie to my mom and dad dozens of times. And when you're a mother or a father, the last thing that you want to be told by your child's clinicians, no less, is that your child is going to die without treatment. And because that they weren't given any other resources, any alternatives, they believed this. And they said yes, they signed off on my treatment because they were told that my life could be on the line. And so from 13 to 16 years old, I underwent the process of a medical gender transition, first starting with a drug called Lupron, which has been the subject of several lawsuits for other purposes. Before, it's been used to treat late-stage reproductive cancers, conditions like endometriosis. It's also been used to chemically castrate sex offenders of children. And yet I, as a perfectly healthy little girl, was put on this treatment that would stop my puberty, my path to adulthood in its tracks. I essentially underwent a artificial and temporary menopause for the duration that I was on these blockers. And very soon after my first shot of the blockers, I was given a prescription for testosterone to masculinize my body. And the drug was so powerful that it caused fundamental changes to my personality, to my behavior, to the way that I thought, and of course to my physical appearance. And by the time that I was in my high school years, I started this in middle school, I looked like a young man. I had the voice of a grown man, deeper than my actual male peers. I went through much of my high school career being treated as a young man because most of my friends didn't know better. I passed, so to speak. And even though I thought that I was happy in this new life and identity as a young man and leaving behind my old self as a little girl, the more that I actually integrated into the role of a man, the more that I realized I was dissociated from myself, that I still had problems, that I wasn't truly happy. But because I didn't know that it was even possible to regret this, or that this could be wrong for me or hurt me, I kept searching deeper. And eventually I sought surgery. Because I looked like a young man from the shoulders up, but I still had breasts. I still was using a binder every day to hide them. I wanted to be free of this uncomfortable medical device that squeezed my breasts down into my ribs. And I wanted to run away from sexual trauma that I wasn't given the opportunity to process. At 15 years old, before I could even legally operate a vehicle, I had my breasts permanently surgically removed. And this marked a major turning point and my transition and my attitude around it. Recovering from it was one of the most difficult parts of my life, both in terms of the physical and the psychological and emotional recovery. It hit me just how permanent and how destructive all of these procedures were when I finally lost organs off of my body. I was 16 years old when I had this epiphany that I was going to be an adult one day, and very soon. And how to have to start thinking about things beyond school, beyond where I may want to get a scholarship to, where I may want to go to college. I had to start thinking about my first relationship, whether I wanted to get married, whether I wanted to have children and a family of my own as an adult. But I started to wonder, how am I going to have children if I've been on these treatments that potentially could have sterilized me because of how young I was on them? Am I going to be able to menstruate or ovulate if I go off of it? What are the risks of birth defects if I choose to get pregnant? What are my own health risks? And even my social transition, me being a woman living as a man, how is that going to affect my children's development? How am I going to explain that? How am I going to explain that my children either have two fathers or that they have a mother who is attempting to appear as a father? And then I learned about the psychology behind breastfeeding and nursing during infancy. And it hit me that I had lost something beautiful. I would never be able to have this amazing experience, and I never would be able to give that to my own future children, if I'm able to have any, because it was already ripped away from me before I understood what that meant. I knew then that I couldn't keep going down this path because it was causing me irreversible destruction. And for a while, I couldn't even bring myself to call myself a woman. I couldn't understand who I was because I was so fundamentally confused over the years by this irresponsible guidance from these adults who were supposed to help me and my parents. But I pushed through in my detransition. And even though it wasn't easy, even though I had no guidance medically, psychologically from my doctors, even though I lost my support from the transgender community completely during this time, I managed to get through it. And my story wasn't just a tragedy. I could heal. I could be that happy, bubbly daughter that I used to be, in spite of everything that I had gone through. I've been speaking publicly about my experiences, transitioning and then detransitioning, since I was 17 years old. I'm now 20, and I've been all across the United States and abroad to tell my story, to give my testimony in various legislatures and communities, because this means everything to me. I want to use the pain that me and my parents and my family went through together to help save other families, to prevent history from repeating itself over and over again the way that it is now. But I haven't really gotten the chance to fight for my own state. And I love California. I believe that we are better than this. California is our home. It's my heart. And I want to know that our children here will be safe too one day, and soon. That one day when I decide to have children of my own, that I won't have to possibly go through this with them again. Because this is not care. This causes harm irreversibly to anybody who partakes in it, but especially children. I want to dispel some of the myths around these treatments, particularly around puberty blockers. You may often hear that this is that puberty blockers are completely reversible, that they give the child just some time to think about whether they want to go through their natural puberty or try to attempt to simulate the puberty of the opposite sex. But what a ridiculous idea that we can stop a natural bodily process and not expect there to be any consequences. Puberty is the only pathway through which a child can fully mature into an adult, physically, cognitively, psychologically, and of course, reproductively and sexually. If you stop a child's puberty for any amount of time, whether it be several months or a few years, which they often have children on these treatments for years up until their adulthood, you are costing them critical years off of their lives, off of their development, learning to integrate with their bodies and socialize with others around them. You're leaving them behind. You are not affording them the opportunity for anything but to be behind their peers. And the other treatments, the cross-sex hormones, the surgery, have left me, all these treatments actually have left me with irreversible changes. The puberty blockers have made it so that I have spinal and joint issues. The testosterone has made it so that I have permanent changes to my voice, my bone structure. I've experienced blood clots in the past, which has been terrifying to deal with. And I have lasting urinary tract and pelvic issues. With the surgery, I'm never going to be able to have the form or the function or the sensation back that could have been there. Not even a reconstruction could take my breast back. And because of how invasive these surgeries are, most people cannot actually go through a reversal because there isn't enough tissue to do so. And you might be thinking, well, what's the harm in maybe allowing children to socially transition or to present themselves as the opposite sex through their name and by calling themselves by a different identity and pronouns? Even this is ridding a child of crucial social development during their youth. Now, as an adult woman, I feel like I'm playing catch-up socially with other women. Because during my adolescence, I wasn't given that time to learn how to socialize with and integrate with other women and the complexities of female socialization, because I was literally being socialized as a young man. I still have flashbacks. Sometimes I have dreams. Sometimes I see myself in the mirror in my waking life as a young man. And I can't put into words how terrifying that is. To see something that isn't there anymore, haunting me for years to come. Now, these are not organic feelings. There is no such thing as being born in the wrong body, and to allow a child to believe that is incredibly harmful to them. What these children are experiencing, where these feelings really come from for these children, for these young people, is a place of deeper personal pain in their lives. If you look at the personal history of these children who identify as transgender or experience gender dysphoria, many of them have a complex personal history of abuse, of neglect, of sexual assault, of trauma, of comorbid psychiatric issues, of learning disabilities. It's clear that their hatred of their sex and of their bodies is not something that is innate. Because there is no such thing as a transgender child. But there are unique, beautiful children who may need more guidance than their peers. Now, this issue is incredibly widespread. California is one of the states that is pushing hard in favor of this issue, ripping away children from their loving parents just because they told them that they love them and that they are beautiful as they are. There are even teachers going behind the backs of parents, telling their children that they can be the opposite sex, that the way that they are born is in fact wrong, and that they should change without the guidance of their parents who understand them best. But no adult has any more jurisdiction and responsibility over their children than their parents.
That's right. That's right.
And yet California is completely ignoring the rights of our parents to saying no, to being informed about their children and what they're going through, and the true nature of what transitioning will actually do to a child. Donald Trump has signed several executive orders. One, to protect women's spaces in sports and our daughters from having their sports invaded by biological men. He also signed an executive order targeting publicly funded institutions that perform these treatments in children, which has been struck down by the Supreme Court and has been ignored by our state's legislature. An executive order is not enough. We need laws, not only federally, but in our state. Because as it is right now, this issue is being left state by state, which may benefit some states that are already going in the direction of protecting children, but California is going far deep, even deeper into the opposite direction, ripping our children from us and taking away their livelihoods for decades. We need to protect our children starting now.
That's right.
We all are concerned about the safety and the innocence of our children. So we need to act now.
That's right.
To every legislator here in California, I urge you to support these measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you for being a truth teller. Okay, our last speaker, but not least, is Ariane Adams-Sakova. Ariane, like most of our speakers, hail from the left, the side that is supposed to blindly support the idea of transgender children and transgender medicine, but like me, reject these notions. Ariane has a front row seat watching as public schools shifted from places of learning to places of indoctrination and secrecy. Please welcome Ariane.
Hello, everybody. I'm a California credentialed teacher, and I'm here to stir up some good trouble. My name is Ariane Adams-Sakova, and I live in San Francisco. I'm an old school leftist Democrat, and I have been a CTA, that's California Teachers Association, high school Spanish teacher for 24 years. I am also a lifelong LGBT activist. I can hardly be called conservative. I am a mother of a formerly trans-identified son. I am one of the lucky ones. My son never thought of reporting his father and me to Child Protective Services when we gently pushed back on his newly adopted identity and when we would not consent to any medical treatments. I cannot imagine the state trying to take him from our loving family. He certainly would not have been given a chance to reconsider his transgender identity. Instead, he would have been affirmed and very likely medicalized, because here in California, children in foster care can decide themselves to undergo transgender interventions. Fortunately, my son was surrounded by his family who knows him best, while he outgrew his transgender phase without having harmed his body. In the last 10 years, I have witnessed as a teacher this new paradigm entering our schools, transgenderism and gender identities. Today in my Bay Area high school, there are upwards of 20 students who identify outside their biological sex. I know from experience that these kids' identities often arise from anxiety, loneliness, homophobia, and too much time spent on the internet. And I know that schools, especially our current curriculum and training, are a big part of the problem. Starting as early as kindergarten, students are told that they have something called a gender identity. This gender identity takes precedence over their biological sex and informs them that their interests, preferences for certain toys, colors, or clothing, even sexual attraction, children are told that they may be born in the wrong body. Such wording creates confusion and psychological trauma and is developmentally inappropriate for young people. It is a sexist, homophobic, simplistic, reductive, and harmful message. It is pseudoscience at its core. Gender roles and their pernicious and ugly gender stereotypes are cultural, but biological sex is immutable. Many educators are woefully ill-informed about what transition actually is. I wish they would hear from some of you here today about the lifelong psychological and medical consequences of social and medical transition, and about how the state-mandated curriculum and pronoun use can hurt many of our most vulnerable students. Consider, gender non-conforming students are told that if they play with dolls, they may be girls. If they play with cars and trucks, they may be boys. LGBT kids questioning their sexuality are told that same-sex attraction could mean that they are literally the opposite sex and straight. Students who have experienced sexual trauma or violence may conclude that they can escape their trauma by opting out of their biological reality. Students who are anxious about puberty itself, weren't we all? Are bombarded by an omnipresent social media market of body image and cosmetic changes. Asking students to choose pronouns yearly, monthly, or in some cases daily creates a perpetual state of anxiety around one's physical presentation and psychological makeup. Schools should be a place of science and truth. Parents have every right to protect their children from being swept up in a powerful and harmful social contagion, of which this is one. I am entirely certain that if educators were given the data and the tools and the lived stories to understand this phenomenon and encouraged students to accept their natural bodies as being perfect, the number of children with gender confusion would decrease significantly. I wholeheartedly support parents' rights to opt their child out of any and all instruction related to transgender concepts. We watched our son struggle with mental health and spiral downward while he was absolutely convinced that his body was wrong and he was transgender. If the legislators care about children, really care, they must enact laws that will permit parents to opt their children out from learning and about a destructive belief system that only brings with it confusion and lifelong medical harm. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. And if there's any press who has any questions, please feel free to come on up. And happy Valentine's Day. It's a sobering Friday, but we can change California. I wouldn't be fighting this hard for the last 5 years if I didn't think it was possible. Thank you.
Thank you.